Joining us now to discuss the Chinese regime's escalating acts of aggression is Leeshai Lemish, Master of Ceremonies at Shen Yun Performing Arts. Leeshai, thank you so much for joining us. Good to have you here. Now, our White House correspondent Iris Tao asked the White House press secretary today about the recent threats, including a bomb threat at the Kennedy Center against Shen Yun. Let's actually listen to her response.
A question about what happened a few weeks ago. The Kennedy Center got bomb threats targeting a performance by Shen Yun Performing Arts, which is an American company showcasing China before communism. This company has been targeted, unfortunately, by the CCP for years. I'm wondering if this administration has a response to this, and also as the president is putting an emphasis on arts and culture, what's the administration's message to potentially foreign state actors who are trying to disrupt that in the U.S.?
Don't disrupt it. This administration will take that very seriously and hold you accountable. We obviously condemn any violence or threats of violence against American institutions. And the president will be traveling to the Kennedy Center later this afternoon. I look forward to going with him. As you know, he is now the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center, where he hopes to restore arts and culture that embrace American tradition, don't disparage it, as we have unfortunately seen over the past several years. The president will be doing a tour of the center. In his business developer mind, I'm sure he will make some recommendations on how the center itself can be improved, but also we'll be discussing perhaps some future plays and musicals and theatrical programs that the center will be hosting under his new leadership and the board's new leadership.
So, Leeshai, first, what's your reaction to the White House press secretary's response? How do you see the U.S. handling these threats so far and going forward?
Well, thank you, Tiffany, and thank you to your correspondent who brought this up. I think it's really tremendous to have this brought up in such a national level, because this is something we've been facing really for the 18 years that Shen Yun has been around, and increasingly so this last tour. We've received now close to 30 bomb threats in theaters where we're scheduled to perform. And just to be clear, these are pranks. These are scare tactics. We don't take them lightly. We always have the police alerted, and they come with the canines and they check, but these are just attempts to scare people away. And it's within the context of this overall transnational repression of the Chinese Communist Party in America, specifically here against Shen Yun Performing Arts. This is just the latest form of it.
And let's step back a bit here. What exactly is Shen Yun? How was it founded? What about it seems to pose such a threat to the Chinese regime?
So Shen Yun was founded in 2006 in New York with the explicit mission of reviving traditional culture. If you've seen our billboards, which you see them everywhere, the tagline is right there, China before communism. And so through stories and legends and folk and ethnic traditions, through classical Chinese dance and live music, the performance breathes life into this ancient civilization that was really brought to the brink of extinction by the Chinese Communist Party, most notably during the Cultural Revolution, but really over 75 years of rule, deliberately trying to wipe out this ancient heritage. And here is Shen Yun bringing it to the stage at the Kennedy Center, coming up at Lincoln Center, all over the world, in front of dignitaries from every walk of life. And this terrifies the CCP because this is the very culture it's tried to destroy. And here's a group based in New York, outside its control, bringing this culture back to life and showing people what China was like before communism and what China could be like without communism. Another big part of the story is Shen Yun was founded by Falun Gong practitioners, many of whom had escaped persecution in China. Among them were elite artists from around the world, choreographers, composers, dancers, and musicians. And they said, let's bring this culture back to life. And at the same time, let's use this medium of performing arts, the beauty of dance, to show what is happening to people in China today under the tyranny of the CCP. Not only how brutally they're being persecuted, but also the courage of their resistance and their faith and their integrity. And let's put that on stage. And every year, among the 20 pieces, we have one or two dances about this on stage. And they tend to be some of the most moving and memorable pieces for the audience. People are moved to tears by the courage of what's happening to practitioners in China and how they're resisting it peacefully. And I think that's another thing that the CCP is very afraid of, because here's a persecution campaign that's gone on for a quarter of a century that the Chinese Communist Party is pretending does not exist, has spent all this money on propaganda trying to cover it up. And here we are performing it at the Kennedy Center.
I want to go back to one of your earlier points. Why do you think there's an uptick in threats recently, whether that's the emails, the bomb threats, or even slashed tires? Why now?
So actually, we received several leaked documents. Actually, they came in through the Falun Dafa Information Center earlier last year, talking about an escalation, a kind of endgame type campaign from the Chinese Communist Party to wipe out Shen Yun right here in the United States and to go after the Falun Gong community more broadly. In this campaign, they talked about several tactics. One of them is strengthening certain influencers on social media. They named them specifically who are aligned with the Chinese Communist Party, trying to influence mainstream media. And that's why you see attacks on Shen Yun in mainstream media. It is very much related to this overall campaign. And trying to pit the United States government against Shen Yun Performing Arts, trying to start frivolous lawsuits, trying to have investigations. This is all detailed in their internal meetings that were leaked out. There's another individual who said that Xi Jinping was specifically behind this. And so we've really seen an escalation. The bomb threats started at the end of last tour around March and April of 2024. And then once we started tour again in December, there have been over 24 now of these bomb threats in theaters. We just got a few of them here in Birmingham and in Huntsville, Alabama, and Des Moines and St. Louis, all over Europe, another one in Taiwan, in Australia, wherever we're performing. These are just pranks, but they're basically threatening terrorism, bombs, mass shootings, rape, and they even threaten congressmen who support Shen Yun. They've threatened President Trump, the Heritage Foundation. The list goes on and on. They say they're going to leave their bodies in the streets of D.C. or by the Statue of Liberty. And this is very much connected to the overall transnational repression of the CCP. And I hope that the U.S. administration, having now seen this right there in the Capitol, will take the further stance of trying to find who these people are who are behind this, who's sending these intimidating emails, to try to find them and try to find their connection to people in Beijing and really speak up about it. And just like with the Fox Hunt and other transnational repression operations of the CCP, send these people back or arrest them here. We've already had a couple of PRC spies who were arrested for trying to revoke Shen Yun's nonprofit status organization. And this is it's not just the tip of the iceberg.
And zooming out a bit, we are seeing that bipartisan push on the Hill against transnational repression. There's the long arm of the CCP. Of course, the Falun Gong Protection Act introduced in the Senate, etc. Now, with Shen Yun's mission of representing or presenting China before communism, do you feel the tide is turning with the growing awareness across the U.S. about the nature of the Chinese regime?
Absolutely. I think we've seen that tide turning the last few years since COVID and everything that's happening with fentanyl and the spy balloons and what's happening in Hong Kong. I think people are much more clear-eyed about what the Chinese Communist Party is. And what Shen Yun really does is say, this is not the Chinese people. This is not China. The problem is the Chinese Communist Party, and even Chinese people have a problem with the Chinese Communist Party. The Falun Gong Protection Act, that's a huge step forward. I'm so happy to see that introduced into Senate. I think there's going to be a lot of support for it. It's really time, and people are being killed for their organs in China. Innocent people who are just like me, meditating in the park one day, the next day they're in prison, and they're being killed for their organs on demand. This is something we've touched upon in the Shen Yun performance. There should be a lot of support for this. If people want to support that right to their senators, I think this is a great time to do that. It is so important because that's really a lot of what drives Shen Yun and the Falun Gong practitioners performing for Shen Yun is this sense of mission. People in China are dying for no reason. They are being killed by an authoritarian and brutal regime, and they need every ounce of support they can get from outside of China. I think this administration right now is in a great position to do that.
Leeshai, Lemish, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tiffany.